Lucia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who don't know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritus teachings and topics in a way that relates to us and maybe makes more sense to us in today's society. Together, we've been going through the Spirits book together, page by page, question by question, really making sure that we can get a basic understanding of what's going on in this book. And the Spirits book, it's not a book that you are meant to just pick up, read once, all in one shot, and then put it down and never read it again. This book, you can continually learn from it. So our point is to start now and read it now and get some basic understanding, and then eventually we reread it and we read it again and we'll learn more and more stuff each time. But right now we're setting the basis for this. We're reading it through once and trying to understand, for the most part, what it's saying. So last week we reached chapter 8 of part 2 of the book. And this chapter 8 is called The Emancipation of the Soul. And to start off this week, what we left off with last week, we left off right in the beginning of a section titled Somnambulists. And it's really important that sometimes it's not words that we use and we don't really know these words. So if you just go and look it up in the dictionary and just on everyone's phone or the computer, you can find out that somnambulist means sleepwalking if you just look it up really quick in your phone. So it's really important that we do look up words and don't be afraid to ask for help or check up words if you don't know what they are, because it'll help our understanding of the topic. So let's get right to it. Question 425. Does natural somnambulism have any connection to dreams? How can it be explained? So naturally, when this happens, is it related to your dreams? And how can we explain this? How can we explain why this happens? And the Spirits answered, it is a state of the soul in which its independence is more complete than in dreams. Thus, its faculties are more unrestrained. The soul has perceptions that it does not attain in the dream state, which is actually a state of imperfect somnambulance. So as we talked about before in the previous parts of this section, we learned how when we're sleeping and when we're dreaming, how our spirit, our soul, is it's not completely detached, but it has some freedom. It's able to move around a little bit. And like we were comparing it to a cord, the cord unravels a little bit. So the cord doesn't break, because that would mean death. The cord doesn't break, but the cord just unravels so the spirit can travel outside of being really close to us. But here they're saying that it's a state like that, but it's even more independent. The soul's even more free. And that's why I say, so more faculties are unrestrained. So now it's not restrained that they can walk or stuff like that. And the soul is able to experience more during this state. And they said that the dream state is basically imperfect somnambulance. So then the Spirits continue. In somnambulance, the spirit is in total possession of itself, but the physical organs are of a sort of cataleptic state and no longer receive external expressions. This state manifests especially during sleep, the time during which the spirit can temporarily leave the body, while the body enjoys the repose that is indispensable to matter. When somnambulistic related activity occurs, it is because the spirit is preoccupied with one thing or another that requires the physical body, which it then uses in the same way it would if it were to employ a table or other material objects in the phenomena of the physical manifestations, or a hand in writing communications. In dreams, you are conscious of the sensorial organs, including those related to memory. Begin to awaken and imperfectly receive the impressions produced by objects or external causes, and communicate them to spirits. The spirit, also in a state of repose, only perceives confused and often fragmented sensations, which without any apparent reason are mixed in with vague memories of either the present life or previous ones. It is therefore easy to understand why somnambulists do not remember anything, and why most of the time the dreams they do remember have no meaning. I say most of the time because sometimes dreams are the consequence of a precise memory of events of a previous life, and sometimes even a sort of intuition of the future. So that was really long, so let's break that up. So in the beginning, they're saying how in somnambulism, the spirit is in total possession of itself. So the spirit has possession of itself, and the body, the physical organs, they're just kind of like frozen. They're not showing any external expressions. So, and then usually this happens during sleep because when we're sleeping, our body is just in the state of relaxation while our spirit has more freedom to go other places. So when they continue with somnambulistic related activities occur, so when such stuff like this is happening, they said, it's because the spirit is preoccupied with one thing or another that requires the physical body. So they're worried about something, or they think about something, or they want to try something, or they want to ask something, and they need the physical body, so that's when that usually occurs. And basically, the spirit is just using the body as an instrument, just like if it were to move physical objects or to write some form of communication down. It's the same thing. It's using the body as a tool to get what it needs done. And then they also go into the fact that somnambulists usually don't remember them sleepwalking, and they don't remember any memory, any dream before that, thinking, oh, this is why I slept walk maybe when someone tells them. But they usually don't remember. And as they explained here, in dreams, our spirit is still using our sensorial organs. So our senses, like we've always learned, our 5 senses. So these senses are still kind of being used, and these organs are still being used. But like we said, during somnambulism, the body is kind of frozen, let's say. So if the body is frozen, it's not using these sensory organs, so it's not remembering much, it's not sensing much. So that's why usually somnambulists don't remember what happened or any the dreams that were happening before this, because their sensory organs weren't really functioning completely. And of course, though, we can't say that that's for every single case, because there are cases, everyone's an individual person, and there are some cases when people are remembering something of their past life or maybe an insight to the future. So there are certain cases, but most of the time, somnambulists don't remember what happened. Question 426. Does so-called magnetic somnambulism have any connection to natural somnambulism? The spirits answered, it is the same thing with the difference that it is artificially induced. So here's the question. They're asking about the difference between magnetic and natural somnambulism. And the spirit said, quite simply, they just said the difference is that one is artificially induced. So magnetic somnambulism is artificially induced. So it's kind of just like how we have mediums who psychograph and they write, the spirit kind of writes through the medium, to keep it in simple terms right now. So when it's a magnetic somnambulance, it's happening artificially. It's not happening just because. But natural somnambulance, it just happens because it just happens naturally, as if someone's sleeping and it just happens. Question 427. What is the nature of the agent called the magnetic fluid? So going along with talking about magnetic somnambulism, we're now going to talk about the magnetic fluid. And the spirits answered, it is the vital fluid or animalistic energy that is a modification of the universal fluid. So all the way in the beginning, when we were in the introduction even, we were talking about, and in the beginning questions, we were talking about this universal fluid. And from this universal fluid, we were saying how everything gets created from this universal fluid. And so what they're saying here, the magnetic fluid, it's a vital fluid, and it's like electricity, like they said, an animalized electricity. So it's not like we can see it like water. It's more like of an electricity that we can't see with our bodies right now. And it's just a modification of this universal fluid. Question 428. What is the cause of somnambulistic clairvoyance? So like we were saying, so somnambulistic, we were talking about like sleepwalking and stuff like that. And clairvoyance is when we're talking about seeing stuff or perceiving stuff that we usually don't perceive with our normal five senses. And the spirits answered, "We have already told you, it is soul sight." So this is our soul, this is our spirit seeing for us, and that's why it's stuff that usually we cannot perceive, but we are perceiving it because it's our soul that's perceiving it. Question 429. How can the somnambulants see through opaque objects? So how can they see through objects? And the spirit said, "No object is completely opaque, except to your dense organs. We have already stated that that matter is no obstacle to spirits, since they can pass right through it. Somnambulants frequently tell you they see through their forehead, through their knee, etc., because you are entirely immersed in matter, and you do not understand that they can see without the help of organs. Nonetheless, you are, at your insistence, they believe they actually need them. If you were to leave them alone, however, they would understand that they see through all the parts of the body, or rather, that they see apart from their body." So they're saying that, here they're saying, so how come somnambulants, why can they say, "Oh, I'm seeing straight through that," or "I'm seeing through a different part of my body"? Well, they're saying is that to the spirits, it's different than us in this physical body. This material body, it's hindering a lot of our spirit's capacities. And the spirit can pass right through these material objects that we have, and it can see through them, and none of them are dense enough that we can't see through them. And also we have to understand that, like we were talking about before, how during the somnambulism the body is kind of frozen, and it's the spirit that's experience everything. And when the spirit's experience everything, we know that the spirit doesn't need eyes to see, and it doesn't need a nose to smell. It just has that general characteristic that it can do that, and it can see through all the parts of the body. So that's why there might be a comment of seeing through your forehead or seeing through your knee or somewhere else, because the spirit, when the spirit is seeing, the spirit can see through any part of the body, because the spirit isn't attached and very connected to this material corporeal body that we have. Question 430. Since the clairvoyance of somnambulants is that of their soul or spirit, why don't they see everything? And why do they so often make mistakes? So here they're asking, since we're seeing through our spirit, our soul, since everything that we're perceiving, it's not through our physical body, then how come we don't see everything? And why do we still make mistakes if it's our spirit that's seeing things? And the spirits answered, "First, it is not given to imperfect spirits to see everything and know everything. You know very well that they still share your errors and prejudices. Second, while they are connected to matter, they do not enjoy all their spirit faculties. God has given clairvoyance to humankind for a useful and serious purpose, and not so that it may learn what it should not know. That is why somnambulists do not know everything." So they brought a few good points in there. So the first one, they're saying that not imperfect spirits, which is all of us, we're not given the right to know everything or to see everything. So we're not going to be able to, just because our spirit has this perception, doesn't mean that when we're back to using our physical body, this corporeal body, doesn't mean that we're going to remember everything, because it was our spirit. The second really good point they bring up here is that even though they have this freedom, our spirit has this freedom, they're still connected to material things, so they're still restricted from all their spirit faculty. And thirdly, God gave this let's say skill to humankind for it to be useful and for it to be serious. So if there's something that we don't need to know, or that is not going to be necessary, we're not going to see it, or we're not going to perceive it, or we're not going to remember it, because it's not important. And somnambulists don't need to know everything. They just need to know what God wants them. Question 431. What is the source of somnambulistic innate ideas, and how can they speak with such precision about things of which they are ignorant in the waking state, and which are even above their intellectual capacity? So they're saying here, the question is, how come these somnambulists, sometimes they have these really grand ideas that when they are in the waking state, when they're fully back to this material body, they don't remember, or maybe they don't even have the intellectual capacity to be saying some sort of idea like that, but during somnambulance it happens. Why? And the spirits answered, it just so happens that somnambulists may actually possess more knowledge than you might think, but it is dormant. Their corporeal envelope is too imperfect for them to be able to remember such knowledge. But who are they, after all? Like us, they are spirits who have incarnated to fulfill their mission, and the somnambulistic state into which they enter awakes them from their mental lethargy. So here they brought up an interesting point at how somnambulists, sometimes they know more than you think, but because this happens when the spirit is kind of in charge, when they go back to being fully in this materialistic and very corporeal envelope, they might not be able to remember all of that knowledge, but they might actually contain a lot of knowledge, it just doesn't come through. And then the spirits continue. We have repeatedly told you that humans live many times, and when they reincarnate, it causes the material loss of what they have learned in a previous life. When they enter what you call the crisis state, they remember what they already know, but always incompletely. They know, but they cannot say where such knowledge comes from or why they have it. When the crisis passes, the memory is erased entirely, and they return to their waking state knowledge. So what they're saying here is that because humans have lived many lives and they've reincarnated, sometimes when we're in this material state, we remember, and not even sometimes, all the time, we don't remember everything from all of our past lives. But when we're in this state of somnambulism, we remember more than when we're fully enveloped in this material body. And sometimes you can say this knowledge and they can have an sort of incomplete ideas, but they don't know where it's coming from and it's not a full idea. And then when they return to the waking state, they're not going to remember it anymore. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment in and he says, experience has shown that somnambulants also receive communications from other spirits, who transmit to them what they must say and supply with what they lack. This is especially seen in cases involving medical prescriptions. The spirit of the somnambulist discerns what the malady is, and another spirit indicates the remedy. This double action is sometimes patent, whereas at other times it is revealed through their frequent expressions. They are telling me to say, or they are forbidding me to say such and such. In the latter case, it is always dangerous to insist on obtaining information that has been denied. Otherwise, the door opens to frivolous spirits who unscrupulously talk about everything without being at all interested in the truth. So here Kardec is adding that not only are the spirits maybe just have this intelligence within them, but they're also learning stuff from other spirits and getting things from other spirits. And sometimes it's very clear that they're getting stuff from other spirits, such as they say, the somnambulists will say, oh, they are telling me this, and they're telling me not to do this, and they refer that other people are telling them stuff. But sometimes it kind of is just like an idea, and it says out like it's their own idea, but it could be another spirit telling them, or it could be the two of them put their brains together and worked and formulated some sort of idea together, like they said here. One came up with what the problem is, and the other one came up with what the remedy should be. So they come together, and that's where the full idea comes from. So it's not always just the individual. Question 432. How do you explain the remote viewing ability that some somnambulists experience? The spirits answered, doesn't the soul travel during sleep? The same thing occurs during somnambulism. So what they're saying is, what about the ability of the somnambulist seeing things and seeing things remotely? And they said, well, during sleep, like we talked about before, during sleep, the spirit travels all over the place. So that also is happening during somnambulism. Question 433. Does the greater or lesser development of somnambulistic clairvoyance depend on the physical organization of the body or on the nature of the incarnate spirit? So they're saying, is it depending more on the physical organization of the body, or is it more on the nature of the incarnated spirit? So is it more the body or the spirit? And the spirits answered, on both. They are physical dispositions that allow spirit to disengage itself easily or not so easily from matter. So it's both. It's both the physical body that's affecting how easy it will be for somnambulism to occur, and also the nature of the incarnate spirit. And that's another thing to really keep in mind when we're reading through all these questions, is that there's not always a clear-cut answer, and it's not always just one thing. Sometimes we want to give one question and have one answer, but it can be both things that are affecting it, and we've seen that through a lot of cases. So we have to open our view and not be so narrow-minded that it has to be one case to everything. Question 434. Are the faculties that the spirit of the somnambulist enjoy the same as those of the spirit after death? So everything that the spirit during the somnambulistic state, everything that the spirit can do, is it the same as when the body dies and the spirit goes back to the spirit world? And the spirit said, to a certain extent, but the somnambulist spirit still finds itself attached to matter, and one must take this fact into account. So as we know that after death, the spirit is completely free. And so they're saying, so during somnambulism, is the spirit completely free? And they said, well, to a certain extent, but part of them is still attached to this material body, to matter. And like we were saying, for dreaming, the string unraveled for the spirit to travel. Well, now during somnambulist, let's say it unraveled a lot, and it's very, very long, very stretched out now, but it's still attached. So the spirit can't do all the things that it would do after death, but it can do a lot of things to a certain extent. Question 435. Can somnambulists see other spirits? So can they see other spirits? This is a quite simple question, and the spirits answered. Most can see them very easily, but it depends on the nature and degree of their lucidity. However, sometimes they do not at first understand what other spirits are, and thus mistake them for corporeal beings. This happens especially to those who have no knowledge of spiritism, because they do not yet comprehend the nature of spirits. Their human appearances fools them, and that is why they think they are seeing living persons. So here they're saying how most somnambulists can see spirits, other spirits, very easily. But sometimes, depending on how evolved the spirit is, sometimes they don't understand that it's a spirit. Sometimes they just think, oh, that's just another living person. But it actually is it is another spirit, not another living person. And then Allan Kardec put his own comment in, and he says, the same effect is produced at the moment of death among those who think they are still alive. Nothing around them appears to have changed. Spirits appear to them as having bodies similar to ours, and they mistake the appearance of their own bodies as being real. So it's kind of like it's in the person's mind. So if that person wants to see the spirit looking exactly like someone they know or a living person that they know, then their mind will kind of form that. And it's the same thing as after death, when when spirits think they're still alive. They just see everyone as if they're just living people. They can't see that it's just spirits, not with corporeal bodies like we have right now. Question 436. Do somnambulists who see at a distance see from the place where their body is or from where their soul is? So when they're seeing from a distance, are they seeing from the spirit that's very far away, or are they seeing where their body is? And the spirits answered, why ask such a question, since it is the soul that sees and not the body? So here they were a little sassy to us, and they said, why would you even ask that? Because we know that it's the soul that's seeing, not the body. Like we already talked about, the body is kind of in this frozen state, and our soul is what's perceiving everything. So of course it's seeing through the soul, not through the body. Question 437. Since it is actually the soul that travels about, how can somnambulists experience in their body the sensations of heat or cold of the place where their soul is, which is sometimes very far from where their body actually is? So what they're saying is, so how come, let's say, I'm in New York, and then my soul travels all the way to Antarctica. How come my body feels cold even though I'm in New York? Or maybe if it travels all the way to Florida, then my body feels hot, but it's maybe cold in New York. So how come? And the spirits answered, their soul has not entirely left the body. It always remains connected to it by the tie that joins them, and this tie is the conductor of sensations. When two persons correspond between one city and another by means of electricity, the electricity is tied between their thoughts. Thanks to it, they can communicate as though they were right next to each other. So the main point here is that they're still attached. Like we said, the string may be unraveled a lot, but they're still attached, because if they weren't attached, then that would be death. So they still are attached, so they still have a connection, and they still have something tying them together. So the thoughts are still connected, and they're still communicating as if they were right next to each other, even though they're not. Question 438. Does the use that somnambulants make of their faculties during life influence the state of their spirit after death? So, whatever they do with their somnambulism during this corporeal life, is it going to affect them after death? And the spirits answered, very considerably, like the good or bad use of all the faculties that God has given to human beings. So what they're saying is, yeah, what you do with it right now is going to affect after death, but that's just like everything else. Whether you were given the right to an education, and what you do to that right now is going to affect you after death, or all the obstacles that we face that are given to us now, what happens with them, what we do with them, that's going to affect us after death. So it's just one of those other things that it depends on what we do now in this life, and it will affect us after death. So that's where we leave off today, but before we leave off, I'd like to read from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, September 26th. This one's titled, Depending on Ourselves. Faced with crisis, the man of character falls back on himself. He imposes his own stamp of action, takes responsibility for it, and makes it his own. Ultimately, we're responsible for what we choose to do or not to do. If we're lucky, we have great support from friends and family, but at some point, we have to make decisions and take responsibilities for them. Right or wrong, it's up to us. We take a deep breath, consider the advice we've been given, draw on our best experience, and do what we think is best. If things work out, we are relieved. If they don't, we expect responsibility and move on. I get lots of advice and support, but I recognize that in the end, it's up to me to make the major decisions in my life. If at all you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, just want to talk about something completely unrelated or completely related, feel free to email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.